Hello, I'm Danny, and this is Marvel Talk. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another short episode of Marvel Talk here. I'm going solo today as I'm going to dive into The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So originally, Jake was going to binge watch this show since it is only 6 episodes, and we were going to go in depth and all of that good stuff. However, in our chat that we have from Marvel Talk, we've been talking about it. I've been watching it week to week, so has Shelby. Based on our conversations of the 5 episodes that are out as of this recording, Jake felt like, you know what, I don't even want to watch it anymore. It doesn't sound enticing to me. And so I didn't want no episode to come out, so here I am doing a quick solo episode. And just disclaimer here, I don't like the show either. It's mainly going to be me complaining about what I think the show is doing wrong and a bunch of other stuff. Is there good things in here? Yeah, there is some good stuff in here. Mainly the fighting choreography, the stuff that they could do in here. Now that Falcon is more in the limelight than he has been in the past, that's cool. The uniqueness of him having the jet on his wings and just using that in close quarters combat, all that's pretty cool. But aside from that, there's really nothing else here that I enjoy from the show. Numerous times I caught myself not really want to pay attention, don't even feel like watching these episodes. I didn't even know there was a mid-credit scene in episode 5, and I just really didn't care. Again, most of this episode will be complaints, so if you don't want to hear that, you can just leave now. But if you stick around, we do appreciate it. You know, if you like the show, good on you. I haven't seen a whole lot of negativity on the show, so shouts out to Disney and Marvel for doing a good job of making a show that's entertaining for the mass majority. But for me and the rest of us here at Marvel Talk, we just do not like what we see going on here. And we would love to hear some feedback of why you think this show is great. So you can send an email to marveltalkpodcast@gmail.com and we could bring it up on the next episode for you guys. So let's just get into it real quick. So The Falcon and the Winter Soldier stars Sam and Bucky as they have to come together to stop these people known as the Flag Smashers that are causing some problems all over Europe. Along the way, we have to deal with Baron Zemo, and as we saw in the trailers, Shannon Carter does show up eventually. And of course, while this is happening, there is the reveal of a new Captain America stepping onto the plate and how that brings in conflict for both of our main characters here. So going into the first episode, I was intrigued as to what we were going to be dealing with here. It starts off with both Sam and Bucky having personal problems going on in their lives right now post-Endgame, and them having to be thrusted back into what they do best. And I thought that was what we were going to be seeing for majority of this show. Sam's dealing with family problems, not letting go of what's important, and struggling to move on when we do have to let go of those things that are important. And then Bucky here dealing with traumatic nightmares of his past as the Winter Soldier when he couldn't control his body and wants to redeem himself by righting his wrongs, going through a list he's written down in a book given to him by Steve, and thinking, hey, if this worked for him to adjust to the modern times, maybe it will for me. But of course, it's a different case here because Bucky has been mind controlled. So we have these problems coming in for our characters, and it's obviously going to be something that they have to deal with for the whole show. And I was on board for that. I wanted to see how these conflicts were going to come together, especially when Sam gives up the shield. And then at the end of the episode, we get the announcement of a new Captain America coming in. And so with that, it's going to cause conflict between Sam and Bucky and what this means for their friendship and for the legacy of Captain America, aka Steve Rogers. And again, I was on board for that. But then we get into the rest of the show. It's not really brought up at all. All the problems and conflicts that we were introduced to do not show back up. But when they do show back up, early on, it is very poorly written. I do not like it at all. It is the classic Disney and Marvel thing that they like to do. There is some Marvel humor in here, which I am not a big fan of. And seeing Bucky and Sam just have conflict for no real reason in certain scenes, it pulls them out of the characters, and it doesn't even feel like Sam or Bucky. It feels like just Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan kind of just ad-libbing arguments in a scene where they're supposed to be serious. And that is the classic Marvel approach. people like that, I understand, but man, it is just not good writing in my opinion. I don't know, it's so jarring, pulls me out of what we're watching and doesn't really keep me invested into what's going on. And then we get into the other episodes, and honestly, it feels like a mess. They don't know what direction to go. There's so many things happening that it doesn't really all tie up together until we're only focused on one storyline. So what do we have? We have Sam's story, we have Bucky's story, we have the new Captain America, we have the Flag Smashers, we have the thing with Baron Zemo when he gets introduced, and then we have this other thing with Shannon Carter that really isn't too big on the show, but it might be in the finale, I don't know. And there is one more storyline, but that kind of really ties into Zemo stuff, so I don't really count that. But just looking at what we have in hand, that is 6 stories being played out within a 6 episode limited series. That is way too much to handle. And it just really feels like a mess because it's like, oh, we have to spend this episode on one storyline, but then we have to bring up this other storyline to make it all feel relevant to each other. And sure, some of this stuff does tie in, like the reason Baron Zemo has a storyline in here at all is because of the Flag Smashers, so that ties in together. The new Captain America storyline could help the Sam and Bucky conflict that goes on with their stories, but it really doesn't, so that was just a waste right there into tying everything together. It really just feels like these are a bunch of one-shots that they're like, let's just tie all of these together because there is a little bit of commonality into the stories. To me, it feels lost. Once we do get more into what the Flag Smashers are about, because they are the main antagonist of the show, things kind of come together more coherently. But that's because the Shannon stuff's already done for the most part. The Zemo stuff is just wrapping up. So is the new Captain America stuff. So we're really left with just the 3 storylines, which are the most important of the show. And that's just unfortunate because that is where the show was losing me. Was all this stuff that kept happening back and forth. What's going on? When are we actually going to touch back on the things that Sam and Bucky are going through that were introduced in the first episode? And it's not until the 5th episode when they come back to that stuff, it's solely focused on Sam really, and then Bucky kind of gets a few scenes talking about his problems, and then it magically just gets fixed. So that stuff really bums me out. Especially with Bucky. I think he's a solid character and what he's gone through, you know, I think he does deserve a little more than just that. And especially because he just really doesn't feel like the Bucky we know. Even in Endgame and Infinity War, you know, he's closer to that than he was in Civil War, sure. It just doesn't feel it. And then even Sam too. You know, like we have to wait until the very end of the show to really dive into what is concerning him about the Shield, about Captain America, about his position in the world. I really felt like a lot of that should have been sprinkled throughout. There is downtime with our characters when they're not dealing with the Flag Smashers, when they have to come up with a plan, dealing with other characters that show up. None of that stuff is ever brought up, and that is just unfortunate because it's like, okay, we'll come back eventually, but you don't even remember that stuff when you're on episode 4 when it's not even brought up at all. So at the end of the day, my thoughts were, this should not have been 6 episodes. This should have been minimum 9, like WandaVision was, to really flesh out this stuff and to really develop the story of every character that is important on the screen. And then real quick, diving into the Flag Smashers, they're very boring. I do appreciate what they're trying to address here in the show because I think it's a cool idea, similar to WandaVision and to Far From Home. We're tackling problems that occurred once everybody came back from the snap. This is the aftermath of Endgame. That's a really cool concept and a good way to build up post Endgame. You can't just say, okay guys, let's go back to normal as if none of that happened. No, there was repercussions, and we're seeing that now in these shows and in Spider-Man. So that was pretty cool. I do like that aspect. But just the leader of the Flag Smashers, she is, in my opinion, very boring. Nothing worth discussion, honestly. It hit me the other day when I was thinking more about this show and the characters that the leader of the Flag Smashers is just the antagonist in Spider-Man Miles Morales that was on PS4 and PS5. They feel like the same type of character. The way that they go down this unfortunate path that they take is the same, and it's not interesting at all. It's one of those situations to where antagonist who's not really a villain is going the route of a villain because they're frustrated about the situation that's going on, and they think this is the only answer, and they're blind to any other reason. That's not compelling writing at all. And, not to say anything bad about the actress, I'm sure it's not her fault. It could just be the script here, right? We've seen that happen plenty of times where actors are just given bad scripts and have to work with what they got. With all of that happening and them being the main focus, that's just really boring to me. And I could really just care less about what's going on with them. But with them being a presence in the show, that's the reason we get Baron Zemo coming in. His stuff is at least interesting. He still sort of feels like how he was in Civil War, but then they had to write in some other stuff for him. And I think that just has to do with the fact that this is a television show. And what does that mean? Well, I'm a big fan of Arrow, so there is the CW drama, quote unquote, that they have to insert into the show to keep it going. And I feel like that's the same here in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is that we have to insert some typical television cliches in order to fill time, because this is also a television show. It's not, airing on cable, but it's still episodic. So they have to add that stuff in there. So some of the complaints that I do have fall in line into that aspect of it. So part of me understands some of that, but I still just don't like it because I thought Marvel was doing something different. That's why they took over the television side instead of just having Marvel TV do it. So some of that comes into Zemo, but he does have some moments that I thought were good, that were decent. And we go to a new location, which was Madripoor. And that caught me by surprise. I was like, oh, dude, no way. We're actually going here. That's another cool thing about this show is we're introducing this iconic place from the comics that mainly involve mutants like Wolverine. So that was cool. And, it does capture the feel of that place from the comics that I've read. Nice little setup to what will eventually show up in the future. And finally, let's just talk about John Walker, aka Captain America, for this show. There's really nothing else to talk about other than the fact that he is also boring because he's so predictable of how he is supposed to be played out in the show. It's called The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and these are two characters that were best friends with Captain America, two of the most potential candidates to take his succession, and we're introduced to a new character who takes the mantle. So of course, what are you going to expect is going to go on with his character? It happens. And they did do something that was off screen that should have been on screen, honestly, to really get more personal with John Walker. And, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it happened and we're moving on. And that was it. It's just really unfortunate to see them handle the characters this way. And especially with a messy story that doesn't become clear until all the side stuff gets tied up and finished. And again, there's good bits in this show, but those good bits did not keep me interested enough to really invest my time into here. The only reason I was watching this show was because, well, we have to talk about it on Marvel Talk, right? Initially, it did pique my interest, right? Falcon and the Winter Soldier, let's see what they kind of do. And after watching the trailers, like we've said on the show, I'm like, okay, it has my attention. But then diving into each episode, it's like, oh man, I really don't want to watch the next episode or even finish the one I'm watching right now. And that's especially with Amazon dropping Invincible during the same time as Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And that's another superhero show that is amazing. We're going to be talking about that one for sure once it ends. So I can't wait to talk about that one. Yeah, just honestly did not enjoy a whole lot of this show. So that's really all I have to say about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier here. The main reason I'm doing it now instead of the finale is because the finale is not going to change my thoughts at all. I have some ideas of how it's going to end. It's laid out pretty thick, and we'll just see what goes on. And I know in the finale they're going to be addressing a thing that has been bugging Sam the whole show, even though it was only brought up in episode 5. It's going to be handled, and it's going to be exactly what we expect, just not only because of the times we're in, but because of what they want to establish with Sam and the future of the MCU. It's nothing thought-provoking, and that's why I figured we'll just talk about it now, because I won't have much else to add after watching episode 6. Well, alright guys, if you stuck around for this long, I really appreciate it. Again, if you have any feedback, marveltalkpodcast@gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts. What did I get wrong on the show? What do you think really excelled here? Would love to hear those thoughts, and we'll talk about it on the next episode, which will be coming soon. We're going to break down some trailers that we haven't covered yet that just came out. And if you want to hear more from me, that's at Negator7 anywhere you go on social media. And you could swing by over to Unverse Podcast. That's our main podcast. And we mainly talk about video games, anime, a bunch of other stuff we don't cover here on Marvel Talk. And then you could go follow Jake at corruption_cosplay with K's. He's still rocking the cosplay stuff hard, doing stuff with the Power Ranger guys, all that great stuff. So you could go find him over there on Instagram. So again, thank you guys for sticking around. We'll be back real soon with a new episode of Marvel Talk. And remember, stay Avengers strong.